Oh, and good evening. It's November 9th, 2023. And welcome to another edition of Branches on the Vine with the Bible Project. Right? We're going to be engaging with one of their videos, You're Supposed to Rule the World. Here's how. We use videos from the Bible Project as our launch point, and then we see where it likes to take us from there. I suspect that our landing point might not be where you think, or even maybe you want. So, welcome this evening to another edition of The Dusty Feet. And of course, before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, then that's when you click the subscribe button. The reminders, they're just there to help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, that is when you click the like button, because that is the way that YouTube chooses to share these to more people if they wish. So, you're supposed to rule the world. Sounds like a thing that some people want, and yet maybe some people don't. Maybe we need to start with a launch point. So let's take a listen to Tim and John as they talk about ruling and what it might and might not be. Enjoy.
So if you lived in ancient Bible times, odds are you lived under the authority of a king.
And many of these kings claimed that they were gods, and they would even call themselves the image of God.
Meaning they had authority to tell people what to do, order things to be made.
Yeah, they got to define good and evil. And these kings would often make statues of themselves, which in Hebrew were called tselem, often translated as idol or image.
But for Israel, they didn't view their kings as the God. In fact, they were never supposed to even make images of God.
It's exactly right, and that was really unique for that time and culture. This is rooted, first of all, in Israel's belief that you can't reduce the creator God down to any one thing in creation. But there's another reason. People aren't to make images of God because God has already made images of himself.
When did he do that?
Well, let's go to page 1 of the Bible. And the first person we meet there is God. He's the one with authority over all creation. He speaks and creation obeys, and he defines what is good and not good. In other words, he alone is king. But then surprisingly, as the pinnacle of all of God's creative work, he makes humans, and he calls all of them the image of God.
So he gives all humans the authority to rule.
Exactly, that's what he goes on to say. He tells the humans to subdue the earth and to rule it. And so this task that once belonged only to elite kings is here in the Bible the task of every human being. This was a revolutionary statement in its day because all humans are being called to rule and to participate in the human project.
So what does this mean? I mean, how are we all supposed to rule?
So the picture we get in Genesis is gardening.
Gardening?
Yes. Gardening. So they rule the earth by cultivating it, by harnessing all of the earth's raw potential and then making something more and new out of it.
So growing food for each other.
Yes, but that also includes growing families then, which become neighborhoods, and then they create communities where people are going to work and take care of each other and build businesses and cities that will expand to new places and so on.
So ruling is really the day-to-day acts of our work and creativity.
Yes, we take the world somewhere. This is humanity's divine and sacred task.
Yeah, and this all sounds really nice. And humans have designed some pretty great things. But just as often we create things that cause a lot of suffering and a lot of injustice. So maybe we shouldn't actually be ruling.
Yeah, so the Bible addresses this. In Genesis, what happens is that God gives humans a choice about how they're going to rule. So are they going to use their authority for the benefit of others, which is God's definition of good, or are they going to turn away and define good and evil for themselves and use their authority for self-advantage?
And in the story, they choose to define good and evil on their own terms.
And so this is the Bible's depiction of the human condition. So sometimes we pull off amazingly good stuff, but just as often, despite our best intentions, we act selfishly and we create evil in the world.
And so we're stuck as mediocre rulers making a mess of things.
But that's not the end of the story. So the Bible goes on and it makes this claim that all of this was resolved when God bound himself to humanity through Jesus. And he showed us what it looks like to truly rule as a human.
So what does it look like?
Well, Jesus ruled by serving and by seeking the best for others, by putting himself underneath them and loving not just his friends, but also his enemies.
And that's not a typical way to rule.
And not only that, Jesus confronted the consequences of all of the evil and the death that we have created by our messed up ways of ruling. And he takes it. I mean, he lets it kill him. And so when the New Testament writers looked back to Jesus' resurrection, they see a whole new future opening up for all humanity.
Jesus is a new way to be human.
Yeah, that's why they called Jesus the image of God, or the new human. And not only that, they also believe that Jesus' divine life and power is now available to heal and to transform us to become our life and power.
And this sounds really nice, but what does it really look like?
So practically, the Apostle Paul said it looks like people being filled by Jesus' own presence and spirit, filled with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and integrity and gentleness and self-control. He says this is the new humanity that God wants to create in us so that we become people in whom God's image is being restored, people who will move the human project forward. And that's actually how the story of the Bible ends. It's a renewed world where God is on his throne and his servants are all around him, but they're the ones ruling over this new world, taking it into new, uncharted territory with Jesus as their healer and their guide.
Thanks for watching this channel. We do this because we believe the Bible is one unified narrative that leads to Jesus and has profound wisdom for the modern world.
So we're making different video series, some that walk people through the design and message of books of the Bible or whole sections of the Bible.
Yeah, we also do a series that take one biblical theme and trace that through the whole narrative arc of the Bible, kind of like the one you just watched. And we have a lot more series coming up that we have planned.
The Bible Project is possible because of your support. So if some people give one-time gifts, and there's a growing number of monthly supporters as well. And we're all behind this. We want to make these videos free and available to anyone, anywhere.
Yeah, so you can join us, be a part of this. Go to jointhebibleproject.com. You can give there. There's also downloadable stuff like full-res videos, study guides, posters. It's all for free, and it's all because of your guys' support. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And we're back. So I think maybe there's an interesting point to consider as we start this off. Power. How do we tend to view power? Do we want it? Is it something we're supposed to have? Is power bad? Is power good? And is authority the same as power? Stop and think a sec. Is authority the same as power? Because here at the Dusty Feet, we tend at times to think of things upside down, as it were. Most likely not the norm. So it's really not a surprise that I like this video, but maybe I want to go a bit further. So how did you view the image part? Really, the image. How did it settle with you that we are the image of God? Probably a good place to start at the beginning, right, in Genesis, to see it again and see if anything's changed. What do I mean changed? So what changed between the initial charter, as it were, who we are and what our roles would be in this new space, and us outside the garden? We've discussed before here on the Dusty Feet that the words and images used in the beginning are of, again, priesthood and kingship. So in our world, especially today, we view these things as on the top words. And of course, all of those other accompanying images that go with it. We have churches where the priesthood's at the top. They are at the pinnacle, the top of the pyramid, as it were. Of course, we tend to view traditional kingship in the same way, right? They tell us, and we do. Power to persuade, as it were. But what if we read these stories behind all these images from a biblical position, and then see if we can shift our paradigm a bit. So in the garden, we were created in God's image. I did like the point that Tim and John pointed out that God does not like graven, right? Carved. Could we maybe stretch that to painted images as well? Shapes and pictures? Is that too much of a stretch? We are on a paradigm check. But the best part was that God already had created images in the people that he wanted to see. It's us. He created us as his ambassadors, his priests, his co-rulers, as it were, to represent him to all the places that we find ourselves. I say that because we were sent out. So the entire rest of the world is now ours to subdue and rule. So we pick up our trusty scepter or sword, King Arthur, right? We rule. We're the power now. We are the boss, the authority, as it were, right? Subdue and rule. So let's maybe, and this will maybe stretch us a bit, so bear with me. We might be upside down. Okay, so we have the best view in the house because we are post-Yeshua, right? We're post-Jesus. We got the example. But here lies the problem. Really think about it, because it might be unsettling. We say that we love the Jesus example. But do we really? Do we really want to live the Jesus example? The infamous, what would Jesus do? Because I'm going to put it out there that we don't. We say we do on the outside, but deeper down, we're not comfortable with that example. I love the graphics in the video with the scepters. Everyone is rulers and our paradigm kicks in. We have the power. That scepter gives us the power to rule, to enact, to persuade. I personally have always had a problem with how are we all supposed to rule? It was not until a few years ago that I was willing to consider that maybe my ruling paradigm and that picture I had in my head was wrong. I again love the graphics. Even in this video, Tim and John challenge us with the wrong tool in hand. We think it should be a scepter, and it really might be more like a shovel. Wait, the shovel, that's more like a servant's tool. We never saw a king that ruled with a shovel in hand. That maybe on Green Acres. Wait, that was a pitchfork. Well, you get the picture. And you get a peek how old I am. But ironically, we even get that imagery in the last revelation given to John the Apostle. And in that scroll, we get the beating of swords into plowshares. They, for us, they're now the tools of choice in the future. So our view of power is probably more messed up than it's ever been, right? Because we're well past the might makes right time, right? It seems more like today, noise is right, or voice is right, or votes are right. But in the stories in Scripture, back then it was more about might is right, as if there was an invading people group that decided that they wanted what you had, they just gathered all their might, their power, they took what they wanted. History is littered with these stories. But we have the beginning, Genesis, and Tim and John put it out there that the ruling, God's economy anyway, was actually the day-to-day acts of caring for others and creation, right? Servanthood, that thing that priests are also supposed to do. So how do we do that? Tim brings up with creativity. How did he coin it? That is our divine and sacred task. So in the graphics used in the video, it was the scepter that all of the creating things were pointed out, right? The good and the bad. They jump back to a point where God drops a scepter in their hands and that the choice about how they want to rule. Yeah. And Tim brings up the question, are we going to use their authority to rule others anyways and the planet with God's definition of good? Or are they going to turn away and define good and evil for themselves? Use their authority for self-advantage. Well, we know from the story what route they took. Scepter in hand, they set out. But I want to maybe put out a slightly different picture in our heads, as it were. We're probably going to put us the same result at the end. But instead of the picture of God giving them a scepter, he gave them a choice, say, a shovel or a scepter, a plowshare or a sword. How do you want to rule? You were created in my image with creativity and choice, so how will you choose to subdue and rule? We still have the end with the scepter and sword. The others, it's still there. We act selfishly, and when we do that, we create evil in the world. We are the ones creating the evil. God does not create evil. We do. Selfish us at the helm. What's the phrase that John used? Mediocre rulers making a mess of things. But so now we're getting to the point where we have a very distinct advantage, and yet, put it out there too, a distinct disadvantage. Because we are post-Jesus, we're post-Yeshua, we're post the last visit. And this is the picture that we think is pretty. We think of it as an image that we want to look at. Maybe. But it's not really for us. Because servant, that's the other choice. The shovel, the plowshare, water basin, towel. No crowns, no regal wear, no lauding over others, no I'm in charge. Just serve others. Love those that are shunned, ostracized, even the enemy. I like how Tim put it. We see Jesus being to the benefit of others, right? And putting himself underneath them. And then we think, boy, that's not really the picture and posture of the king that I have in my head. Tim also said a phrase that I want us to maybe consider with a revision. He talked about the writers of the New Testament after the resurrection, that they see a whole new season, a new future opening up, a new way for humanity. That Jesus is showing us a new way to be human, the image of God. So I'd like us maybe tweak that a bit. Because first, that's not necessarily new. It was intended from the beginning to be that way. Second, maybe a firmer emphasis on now. Because it seems Jesus has given us the exact same choice as the garden, right? Shovel or scepter, plowshare or sword, towel with a basin. I agree that we are filled with Jesus' presence. Our daily implements need to be changed. So what will our choice be? Yet the kingdom now had a practical sense. As Tim said, it's filled with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, integrity, gentleness, self-control. Tim called it the new humanity. But I'm going to put it out there that it's the intended humanity from way back at the garden. Because if we are the image of God, might we then reflect that? Because isn't an image what is seen in the mirror? God gave us a description of himself, how he was to be recognized. It's in Exodus 34. It's Exodus 34, 6 and 7. Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and kind and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Jesus gave us, by his very life, a refreshed example of God's image that's going to need to be restored. He lived the very example for that. And we love the picture. We write stories, devotionals, and songs about that example. We just don't really, deep down, like it. That's brutal honesty in a mirror. We don't like the shovel, the service, the forgiveness. We want the scepter. We want judgment, power. We aren't big fans of the plowshare. The sword is cooler. Our image of ruling. I keep going back to something that Jesus said about the kingdom already being here. I've struggled with that for many years. Is it a metaphor? Is it a now is later? Or is it really expected for us to be that way now? To live like Jesus lived now. He is king, and we are, as we always have been, representatives of the king. So how do we reflect that? Let's wrap around to the beginning. Power and authority. So where did Jesus get his power and authority? Seems Jesus even helped us there, because he told us it was his Father. Everything he did with the power and authority, and more paradigm stretching a bit, permission of the Father. Only what the Father wanted done. So power. Do we really have power? That's probably yes and no, maybe. We make our creative choices and we call it power. I'll bite there. But is it the power that I want? Probably not. Authority? Oh, that's a much stickier question. Whose authority? And it's an interesting term that we stick with it. Under. Whose authority are we under? Jesus chose God, his Father. He chose him to obey, even unto death. The authority of the Father? It was his will that needed to happen. It's interesting in the graphics that they chose to return the scepters to the people, where I say maybe we need to do it a bit more. We want to do it a bit different. Because maybe they were always supposed to be the farm implements, the servants' implements, the upside down ruling implements, serving others, serving creation, a different kind of ruling. Jesus lived that life, and he said, live my Father's ways, do my Father's will, and I'm going to give you my life as an example. So I look back over the lives of the apostles, that small select group of men chosen to take the message forward. Because I look at their lives too. So none craved conventional power, the opposite really. None stirred revolt. None hid from the challenges and authorities of the day. And if we have the traditions and stories true, they lived servant-filled lives, caring for others, never claiming the power of God to smite others, never even asking God to take them away. Because it seems they embraced the accounts that came from them. Those gospel accounts. They embraced Matthew 5 through 7. They embraced Luke 6. Those chapters that we love, and yet at times don't. Serving, meek, humble, loving the unloved, loving the enemy, turning cheeks, giving cloaks, carrying things longer. Surely, it can't mean all of that. How could God expect us to let this happen to me? Sure, it worked for Jesus. He's different. A bit scary. And even looking at the lives of those that followed or even chosen later, Paul leaps to mind. They lived exactly that too. They never asked to be rescued. They always served the communities that they were in. We even have references to them not wanting to be a burden on the communities that they were with, and they worked there as well. We love to call on the power of God, often for our view of judgment, or things to happen the way we envision that they should be. But it seems Jesus, as king, he might rule a different way, at least if his first visit is any indication. Sure, in the end, there will be that judgment part that he will have to deal with, hopefully without me in the mess. Yet, as a reflection of the king, I suspect that his example will not have changed much. We're supposed to help rule this world this way. That seems a daunting task. Expecting God to do his part, that part that only he can do, while we live out the example given to us. Be like Jesus. Remember that to rule in the conventional paradigm today, one would need folks to rule over. We can't all be the boss. If we were bosses, all of us, well, food for thought. Yet, we changed our implements. We gave up our scepters for shovels, picking up the towel in the water basin. Then the over switches to under. That works a whole lot better. A kingship that looks like none other. But hey, we serve a God like no other, because he chose to use us as his image example. That is a humbling and even intimidating thought. Don't you think? And thanks for with us tonight with the Bible Project on another edition of The Dusty Feet.